and thank you all for joining this Disability Reference Group session on localization and inclusion. My name is Sandra Zerbo. I'm the Disability Focal Point at the Interagency Standing Committee here in Geneva, and I have the honor of moderating today's session. Before we start, a few words on logistics. This event, as you can see, is held in hybrid format, both here in the room and online. We have captioning and sign language, including for online participants, who can also access this through an external link, which will be provided in the chat. And this will take you to an external window just for the captioning. For all our presenters, both online and in the room, we kindly ask you to speak slowly enough for our translators. And colleagues online, please feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat as well as we go, so that we can go through them when we open the Q&A. And also to note that this session is being recorded for sharing purposes after the session. Alors, shortly, we're going to have opening remarks from Ms. Seema Chandra, who is humanitarian counselor at the Australian Permanent Mission here in Geneva. And then we will hear from a distinguished panel, both here with us and online, who will delve into the challenges and solutions to disability-inclusive localization from different contexts and vantage points. We're going to hear from Ms. Mapakai Siddiqui, who is joining us from Kabul. She is the director of the Kabul Orthopedic Organization, an Afghan organization of persons with disabilities, and also the co-chair of the Disability Inclusion Group. We're going to hear from Ms. Daria Sidorenko, who is joining us from Ukraine. She is representative from the League of the Strong, a network of national and local NGOs in Ukraine. Then we're going to hear from Mr. Al-Radi Abdullah, here with us in person, who is Inclusive Humanitarian Action and Disaster Risk Reduction Advisor at the International Disability Alliance, and also a co-chair of the Disability Reference Group, the organizer and host of this session. We will then hear from Ms. Joyce Mutiso, who is with us online. She is the Child Protection Area of Responsibility Deputy Coordinator, representing the Global Cluster Coordination Group's Localization Working Group. And last but not least, Mr. Narciso Rosa Berlanga, who is with us online from New York, and who is the head of the Desk for Latin America and the Caribbean and West and Central Africa at the Program Units for OCHA's country-based pooled fund sections. Now, without further ado, let me hand over the floor to Ms. Seema Chandra, who will give us our welcome and opening remarks. Over to you, Seema. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and thank you very much for having me here. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to provide some opening remarks for this event, which really gets to the heart of the nexus between two critical issues right now, localization and inclusion. And before starting, I think it's useful to just take a step back for a moment and to consider why inclusion, but also localization, remains so important to humanitarian action. And as we all know, impartiality is a long-standing humanitarian principle that compels us all to help those in greatest need. But we also know, in practice, that humanitarians have sometimes struggled to deliver on this. And in the past, there have been times when we're operating on assumptions about who is in need and what they needed. And I think that really gets to the heart of not understanding context. So, at this time of stretched resources, when there's a move to streamline and get back to basics in terms of the way we deliver humanitarian assistance, and we recognise that's necessary, we also want to make sure that we aren't going backwards to less sophisticated ways to deliver that don't capture nuance. So, sorry, I'm trying to go slower, but for Australia, disability inclusion is a long-term priority, and localisation was confirmed as a key aim of our development program in 2023. Organisations of persons with disabilities, or OPDs, are where the rubber hits the road on localisation and inclusion. And that's particularly the case for humanitarian responses. Australia believes strongly in the need to ensure that persons with disabilities are not only receiving appropriate assistance, but also participate as key actors in humanitarian response. We have learned from years of experience that local and national OPDs are the experts on the needs and priorities of their own communities and are best placed to guide planning and implementation to ensure that no one is left behind. This is reflected in Australia's new International Disability, Equity and Rights Strategy, which was launched in November last year, and identifies 5 strategic priorities, and 3 of those are quite pertinent to the discussion today. They are to support equity in humanitarian assistance, as well as climate action informed by the expertise of people with disabilities, to invest in partnerships and movements that enable a strong and effective disability rights movement, and to promote preconditions for inclusion. The key shift that we committed to in this new disability strategy is to focus on disability equity rather than disability inclusion. And to quote the former CEO of the Pacific Disability Forum, and I put this in quotes now, inclusion can ensure we have a seat at the table, but it is equity that will transform and reconfigure that table to guarantee our full, effective and meaningful participation. Australia's strategy was drafted in intensive consultation with OPDs. It prioritises support for local leadership and decision-making and commits to deepening partnerships with OPDs. And I think, quite notably, it also has our first ever performance target on disability equity. It's a phased target which says that 60% of our development and humanitarian assistance should be performing effectively on disability equity by 2026 and 70% by 2030. So I'm pleased to say that we've already found some practical ways to put commitments into action, and it's particularly in the Indo-Pacific where OPDs play a key role in preparedness for disaster and in delivery of humanitarian response. So just one example is the Australian Humanitarian Partnership's Disaster Ready program, which partners with local OPDs in 5 Pacific nations to support inclusive preparation and response to disasters. And by way of example, it includes resourcing a disaster risk reduction advisor officer position in each OPD to make sure that there's localised technical assistance, capacity building, resource development, etc. So we are working with OPDs to promote their role and in preparing and responding to humanitarian response. But to be frank, as donors, we do find it easier to achieve progress on disability equity indicators with smaller local partners than sometimes with our larger humanitarian multilateral partners. And so we understand that there's a need for continued advocacy to hold the whole humanitarian system to achieving disability equity in responses. And the advocacy that we're talking about is a key role for our hosts today, the Reference Group on the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Humanitarian Action, or the DRG. Australia is really proud to support the DRG, and it has been since 2020, because it connects local and global actors, including OPDs and international humanitarian actors. And we also note that it's gained recognition and increased its value as an interagency group, as reflected in the significant growth in its membership, increasing from 160 members in 2020 to 550 members today. So to wrap up, I think in times of constrained resources, we need to work together to make sure that inclusion is not seen as an add-on or a nice to have, but a critical part of delivering impartial humanitarian responses based on need, and, like localisation, is central to effectiveness. And we also note that like with affected populations more broadly, we know that local and national organisations are diverse and face different and particular challenges. So in this event today, I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of our panellists about how we can ensure that OPDs are at that transformed and reconfigured humanitarian table. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Seema, and for these inspiring words as well. I really do believe that, speaking of equity, indeed, rather than inclusion, can really help us in terms of not only shaping the discourse, but also moving to something that is indeed allowing us to effectively ensure that in all our humanitarian responses, persons with disabilities are fully engaged and also at the decision-making table for responses. We're going to now move to Kabul and hand over to Mapekai, who is the director of the Kabul Orthopedic Organization, an Afghan organization of persons with disabilities, and also the co-chair of the Disability Inclusion Working Group. And she will share her organization's experience on engaging in humanitarian action, the challenges and examples of how they were overcome and what the enablers were for that. Over to you, Mapekai, if you're online with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, hello to everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity for me to be in this event, in this important discussion about localization and disability inclusion. Thank you very much for this. It's my pleasure. As you, please next slide. As you know, long-term conflict in Afghanistan, and it's all lead to the rate of person with disability in Afghanistan with different factors like conflict, crisis. This all increase the rate of this prevalence of rate of person with disability. Has this recent three years the long-term crisis with an estimation of prevalence rate of person with disability in Afghanistan as it is 78.9. We believe this is much more than this number because this factor is going on to increase this rate. And also this rate is divided on the mild disabilities, moderate disability, and severe disability. As you see, the 13.9 percentage prevalence of the severe disability. This is the reports or the statistical survey that did on 2019. Among this person with disability, 33.1 have multiple disability. And also if we see the youth's prevalence among the children age 2 to 17 years, the rate is 17.3 have a multiple moderate and severe disability. The prevalence of disability increasing with aging and also with the crisis that because of different factors that's coming together. In this response, there are estimated the 38 number of organization of person with disability. 68 number of person with disability, organization of person with disabilities in Afghanistan, as well as there is a number of NGO, national NGO and international NGO that leading or governing by person with disability. They are employing the person with disability, and they are working for person with disability through service provision and other programming. But there is a limit number of NGOs that leading by person with disability or working for person with disability. Please, next slide. Please let me briefly give information about to you about a couple of big organizations. Couple of big organizations internationally would count it as OPDs, as it is leading and governing by person with disability and by woman with disability, and also employing person with disability, but it is not registering as a OPD. It is a national NGO in Afghanistan. In context of Afghanistan, the national NGO can apply that leading by person with disability. They are allowed to apply for funding as a OPDs or as NGO as well. There are other NGOs like who are governing, leading by person with disability. We can have an example of organization like accessibility organization of for person with disability. Like this organization, there is they are leading by person with disability, and they are providing services and employing person with disability. There is also much more other NGOs that leading or working for person with disability. Enabler for engagement and localization efforts and implementing humanitarian aid, accessing for funding. It is a bit. It is difficult for it. There is lack of funding for NGOs leading by person with disability or and also for OPDs. The OPDs are facing additional challenges that many OPDs trying to register the OPDs as an NGO because after Taliban take over Afghanistan, they stop issuing new license or registering OPDs. They asking from OPDs to register as an NGO, but or as a union. But they are the OPDs facing with challenges on paying the fee during to convert it as an NGO. Please, next slide. Please let me share my experience when I'm coming the Disability Inclusion Working Group Afghanistan. When I came to this working group, I feel that I'm not fitted in this position. But there was need required to push and support. Thanks from HI, they are supporting. They are encouraging me to go for election and for disability co-chair. The outcome of this co-chairing in the Disability Inclusion Working Group of Afghanistan, this can raise concern of OPDs who would not have access. And also I'm participating in cluster consultation and directly on matters of disability and also local wise and also I'm working as I'm also as a member of HCT, a humanitarian country team, and also ICCT. There is a rising issue about the local NGO and also women and person with disability. I'm engaging in this working group. And in 2024, I necessity the DRWG recognize it as a best practice or a setup of localization and inclusion, because this working group is leading by a UN agency, which is now UNHCR, and also the international organization HI, and also OPDs and local NGO, which is I'm representing OPDs and local NGOs who's working for persons with disability. Awareness raising and integration, more working group they invite me to participate in their working group, to be member of this working group, to bring the perspective of disability and gender as well. And I was participating in HNRP and also the data collection, reflecting the better voice of person. I try to reflect the better voice of OPDs, Organization of Persons with Disability, and also more systematic, inclusive. This next slide. As a co-chair on different role, engagement and review when there is an allocation from Afghanistan Humanitarian Fund. All these proposals are coming to this to Disability Inclusion Working Group. I am also part of the reviewing of this proposal to promote and to recommend the meaningful participation and persons with disability, OPDs, and national NGOs. During the reviewing this proposal, we consulted and we gave the recommendation for humanitarian implementing partner to engage with OPD, with Organization of Persons with Disability, and in the need assessment, not only just as a beneficiary, just receiving some services, but the meaningful participation of Organization of Persons with Disability and also Persons with Disability itself, from designing of the project to implementation. Persons with disabilities access to services as well. We recommend how to make the safe space and accessible space for those persons with disabilities to receiving services. And also for the feedback mechanisms, how to reach that. And also example of NGOs working, there is less interest to support the OPDs or the national NGO in localization, unfortunately. But it is not all. We have good examples as well as DRC and also HI. They are partnering with OPDs, with Organization of Persons with Disability, or NGO that working for persons with disability, for meaningful participation of persons with disability in localization, and also providing services for persons with disability in a meaningful way and also inclusive way. Please, next slide. Challenge for us and from beginning, as I am also mentioned, some challenge of Organization of Persons with Disability and local NGO as well. There are some specific challenges that they are facing. The government has posed as before also shared this issuing or renewal of the OPD's license, Organization of Persons with Disability license, after taking over Taliban. The OPD's Organization of Persons with Disabilities not allowing to operate in Afghanistan, but they are not give up it. They are trying to directly or indirectly to be participated in humanitarian programs, and the OPDs need to register with Ministry of Justice again as a union, or converted to NGO and registered with Ministry of Economy. This is a big challenge for OPDs because the OPDs facing with lack of funding, and also they need, if they want to convert it to NGO, they need to have structures of permanent employee, and also to keep it operate the NGO. OPDs also facing a lot of challenges on access available humanitarian fund because they are not allowing to work, and also they are also not meaningful considering participation of these OPDs on humanitarian programs. And also the OPDs working with a smaller size than NGO, and they are more functioning in grassroots level and working with volunteers and also with small grants or donations. They are also, and 3 years ago, they are working in such situation. And also they are facing a lack of capacity development and a small medium capacity grants opportunity available for OPDs. And also even those NGOs who have working and they are allowing to participate, allowing to operate as a OPDs or supporting the person with disability, they are facing with lack of fund. And also there is a big challenge for persons with disability, high stigma and discrimination observing on many NGO do not consider the person with disability as a staff candidate. This was it to the qualification or professional. Many times as a DRG co-chair, we are recommended to hire person with disability in their programs, and it is the meaningful participation of person with disability. As the first speaker said this is the nice word that equity, but unfortunately there is lack of consideration on this. But DRG is working strongly, and they are advocate on behalf of persons with disability. There is also some recommendations how to advance the disability inclusion efforts. There is need to conduct a national-wide survey to gather accurate data on persons with disability. As you know, there is not well accurate data exist in Afghanistan on persons with disability. As I am presenting the Asha Foundation, it is conducted in 2019, but somehow it was not acceptable for some agencies. This is a huge need to have this data, and also encourage the international donors and integrate disability inclusion into their Afghanistan strategy. Those NGO donors funding to Afghanistan or working in those international organizations or working in Afghanistan, encourage them to have disability inclusion in their strategy. Facilitate and acknowledge the sharing between the Afghans OPDs and also global disability rights network. Thanks, which is one of them is today that we are sharing in this event. Also capacity building and initiative as well. International organization provide guidance and resource to strengthen the capacity of organization of persons with disability, enhancing their ability and advocate for disability right and inclusive. Thank you very much. Sorry that I'm a bit fast. I apologize.
Thank you so much, Mapakai. This was a great, very insightful presentation, and it's, I mean, we hear that there is still a lot of work to do, but it is very important to note as well that you and your organization are part of the humanitarian country team, which means that there is space, or that space has been given for a national OPD to be at that level and at the leadership table. And hopefully that's a good step forward that other contexts can also learn from. So thank you so much. Without further ado, let's give the floor to Ms. Daria Sidorenko, who is a representative from the League of the Strong, which is a network of local NGOs in Ukraine, and she will share their experience in the humanitarian response, the challenges that remain for local OPDs, and how they can overcome them. Thank you. So over to you, Daria, if you're with us online.
Yes, I'm here and thank you for the floor. My speech consists of three parts. In the first part, I will share general information about the number of organizations, people with disability, and number of people with disability in Ukraine, and the general information in regard to humanitarian help for people with disability. Done by League of Strong. And the second part of my speech consists of two challenges. First part, which we can solve, and the second part, which are still are not solving, and we are thinking how to do with that. I will start to share information about that. League of Strong is Ukrainian umbrella organization. It's association that has 6 full member organization of people with disability, and our community unite approximately 100 civil society organization of people with disability. We can compare that Ukraine is quite a big country. There are approximately 40 million people. And when we start think about official data regarding the number of people with disability, it is approximately 3 million people. We understand that official data not are appropriate, not as the real number of people with disability, much more higher than official data. For example, begin full-scale invasion, there were 2.7 people with disability in Ukraine, and Minister of Social Policy now provided information about 3 million people. And we have acting phase of the war, and only 300,000 people will edit, and it demonstrates that we do not have really data regarding the number of people with disability. Regarding the number of people with disability, organization of people with disability, we also do not have official data regarding that. Humanitarian organization agency of UN tried to collect information about that, and there are approximately 500 organizations of people with disability, but we can't say that it's truly for sure or not, because we share this information, we share the list of organizations we work with, League of Strong work with, and other organizations, and based on this information we have this number, but it does not mean that it's really official data from the state. It's the first part of information. I would like to share the second part. League of Strong have founded by 6 non-government organizations of people with disability, and our main purpose of our activity is unite organization of people with disability for the sake of a decent life for every person with disability. Since the full-scale invasion has started in 2022, we shift our focus of activity to help people with disability and members of their family to overcome the circumstances of the war. And with this activity, thankfully, to European Disability Forum, Christian Blind Mission, for their support, League of Strong with the 11 non-government organizations of people with disability can help 25,000 Ukrainians with disability and members of their family. We have provided different services, for example, evacuation to safer regions, provision of temporary housing, psychological support, legal consultation, distribution of hygiene project, supply of spare parts for assistive technologies, and consultants on accessible house adaptation. There are only a small list of our services, but it's much more wider. We also cooperate with international humanitarian organizations, the UN agency, to ensure that the aid efforts consider accessibility and specific needs for people with disability. It's then we work with the organization who League of Strong is an organization which work in all territory of Ukraine, but we work with the organization who work in the small part of Ukraine, and we are interested to work with them because with their help, we can provide assistive devices, provide cash to people on the rural area, which are really needs to. And the last point, we are actively work, we mapping needs and barriers. And for example, the last survey, we conducted a survey on needs people with disability during power outage. Based on our experience of providing humanitarian aid, working with the cluster system, with international humanitarian organization in Ukraine, working with the public authority, I can share some challenges which we face too in the area of localization of humanitarian aid. First part, I highlight 3 points which we can overcome more or less, but these challenges exist. First of all, I would like to say about limitation inclusion in decision making. It means that many organizations of people with disability were initially excluded from the key humanitarian coordination mechanism, making it difficult to ensure a disability inclusive response. To overcome this required persistent advocacy and direct engagement with humanitarian clusters. I would like to share that clusters, it's a good platform to communicate and to share our data, our experience, and to get a new contact. But nevertheless, organizations who work on the rural area are rare take part in this cluster system. That's why many activities from many activities this organization are excluded. Also, I would like to share that sometimes local organizations take part in the decision-making process to propose their activity, but this activity are excluded on the different reasons. Some of them, this is exclusion are okay because, of course, local organization can't see the whole picture of the international organization and UN agency, but sometimes this exclusion is not appropriate. Secondly, to overcome these challenges of limitation, inclusion, decision making, we are actively work, implement joint project with international humanitarian organization. For example, League of Strong actively work with the Handicap International Humanitarian Organization, which to implement one project. Also, we had project with WHO and the clusters, and within this joint project, we provided a sociological survey regarding the needs of people with disability during the war, and which includes the area of employment of people with disability. Second challenge is its limitation in understanding the needs of people with disability. We should understand that humanitarian aids provided by international organization and local organization which are not work with the people with disability. Their recommendation and way of working trying to provide aid to lots of people, and much more important sometimes it's the number of people. But here we should understand that when we're talking about accessibility for people with disability, sometimes it's require less number of people who can receive this humanitarian aid. Sometimes it's required additional funding, and this is highly important and include to the program. And sometimes it's need to remind themselves how we can help people with disability. If it sometimes means that we decrease the number of people can help who can receive humanitarian aid. And third point of challenges, it's insufficient accessibility. I mean here that the way of share information sometimes, it's not sometimes, sometimes or often, are not accessible for different people, for different type of disability in Ukraine. And here we work with the organization to provide a recommendation how to improve the website, how to improve information in their website, how to improve providing information via leaflets to be more accessible. And the last point of my speech is about challenges which are highly important, and we trying to work with to overcome them. First of all, I'd like to share about the problem of a lack of accessibility. And here I mean that first of all, architectural accessibility. Many shelters, evacuation routes, and humanitarian distribution points were not accessible. It's a general problem, actually. Also, we do not have a decision on the place of permanent residence of people with for people with disability who are evacuated from the region which where war are highly actively. Here, League of Strong is trying to work with the local authority, and we started initiate a dialogue with them. We trying to raise the awareness of the needs of people with disability. We encourage them to actively work on inclusive community development. We promote implementation of local solutions that ensure real access to services and spaces of everyone. And here I started to talk about the local authorities because we understand that humanitarian aid are more short-term help, and here we need to transform short-term help to long-term decision. And in this process we have to include local authority, central public authority to the process of humanitarian aid to start provide new services in different local and central services. So here we still have a problem of architectural barrier, and here we do not have solve how can do that quick, but we need to unite and think and start to work to do that, to overcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daria. for this. You're getting claps here from the room. This was a very insightful presentation, and honestly, the points about ensuring that data, information, infrastructure are indeed accessible to persons with disabilities is so important to make sure that our humanitarian responses and coordination structures understand the needs of persons with disabilities so that in effect we are able to respond to them in a manner that is inclusive. Let's hand over now to Mr. Al-Radi Abdullah, who is inclusive with us here, who is inclusive humanitarian action disaster risk reduction advisor at the International Disability Alliance and the co-chair of the Disability Reference Group, and who will talk to us about how to promote leadership and participation of local organizations of persons with disabilities. Over to you, Al-Hadi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Hello all, colleagues. Nice to be with you here. I will be brief as we are running behind the time to talk about the DRG and how the DRG is promoting the leadership of persons with disabilities in the humanitarian action system. So a quick introduction to the DRG. The DRG had been launched during Humanitarian Network and Partnership Weeks in 2020, following the launch and the endorsement of the Interagency Standing Committee guideline on the inclusion of persons with disabilities. The DRG is a platform for fostering collaboration and cooperation between the different actors working on the humanitarian setting, including OPDs, UN agencies, NGOs, donors, and so on and so forth. The DRG has been recognized last year, in particular in November, as Interagency Standing Committee associated entity that gives the DRG space to empower or to advocate for more disability inclusion within the humanitarian system at the system-wide level. Generally, the DRG has been working as a platform, as I mentioned, fostering collaboration between the different actors. Given this background, now the DRG is co-chaired by 3 entities representing OPDs, UN agencies, and NGOs active in humanitarian action. The DRG has been growing since its establishment, and now we have more than 550 members, including significant numbers of national and local OPDs. And generally, the membership includes the different actors, UN agencies, OPDs, national and international NGOs, donors, and network of humanitarian actors, and local NGOs as well. The DRG work in different areas, and one of them is strengthening the leadership and participation of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action. And to achieve this goal, the DRG has dedicated a standalone working group to promote the leadership of persons with disabilities. In the working group, where humanitarian actors and OPDs come discuss the priority of OPDs and also discuss about how they can foster the engagement of OPDs in the humanitarian action. As you probably imagine that there are some gaps for OPDs to engage in the humanitarian settings. Those gaps, some of them are related to capacity building, funding, and need from OPD side. And also some of those gaps are related to the humanitarian system itself, related to accessibility, related to fostering or facilitating regional accommodation and other requirements for OPDs to meaningfully engage in the humanitarian setting. Given this background, the DRG had done some activities, in particular to raise capacity building within OPDs. The DRG used to have a project that worked on having online orientation session to OPDs in different regions across the globe, and also foster in-person trainings that are in-depth, bringing together OPDs and humanitarian actors to learn and engage from and with each other. And those trainings were conducted at regional level in Asia and Pacific, MENA region, and also Africa Francophone regions. The DRG, moving forward, are planning to have regular meeting as a forum to bring local and national OPDs to present about themselves and their work during the DRG monthly meetings, so they can gain visibility and share about their work, and they can engage further and network with the humanitarian actors. The DRG used to have a project that has been impacted by the recent US policy change. The project has different components. One of them is to foster and strengthening localization through capacity sharing. The project was aiming to strengthening the capacity of OPDs and humanitarian actors at national level through online trainings, in-person trainings, and also was having activities related to creating a working plan for OPDs at national level so they can engage further in the humanitarian system. And that was supposed to be accompanied by a small grant so OPDs can have the means to implement their action plan and to engage further and meaningfully in the humanitarian setting at national and local levels. However, as I mentioned, the project has been impacted by the recent development in the humanitarian and the US policy change. And we are looking forward to get another fund to sustain those activities. As I mentioned, the DRG is always committed to strengthening the leadership of persons with disabilities through their representative organization in the humanitarian setting, and that one pillars of the DRG work, and the DRG will remain committed and will remain facilitating those engagement and support this space to be more disability inclusive and for organizational persons with disabilities to meaningfully engage and contribute to the humanitarian setting and being not only part of consultation or participation, but also be partners and be leaders and active actors in response to humanitarian crisis across the globe. Many thanks for the opportunities, and we are welcoming any question by the end.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Al-Hadi, for your concise but very clear presentation. You know, we can never say enough that it's of very crucial importance that persons with disabilities and the organizations that represent them are engaged as equal partners in the response at all of its different phases. Let's now hand over to Ms. Joyce Mutiso, who is here representing the Global Coordination Cluster Group's Localization Working Group, who will talk to us about how to better include OPDs in localization efforts with concrete recommendations and commitments. Over to you, Joyce, if you're with us online.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Global Cluster Coordination Group, which is the interagency coordination group for clusters at the global level. And we have a working group that focuses on localization and on inclusion, as has been said. It is my privilege and honor to speak with you today, and I hope that we can share some inspiring examples as well as some recommendations and concrete actions of how we can move forward to integrate persons with disabilities within humanitarian coordination in a meaningful manner. Now, as some of you may be aware, or most of us may be aware, not all of us, We are now in the midst of what has been termed the humanitarian reset process, and this is under the leadership of the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Tom Fletcher. This reset entails looking at a number of recommendations and work streams through which we will have discussions and consultations, and at the end of this, or as part of this, some decisions will be made and some changes are expected to take place on how we run the humanitarian system and on how it is organized, as well as on interagency coordination. For us at the Global Cluster Coordination Group, it is important that persons with disabilities and their organizations are consulted and are involved in looking at how the humanitarian system and the interagency coordination will run in the future. Just last week, as part of this year's Humanitarian Networks and Partnerships Week, we hosted a session which was titled Breaking Barriers on Localization, looking at leadership of local women-led organizations and organizations of persons with disabilities in humanitarian coordination. Some of the points that we would like to share today reflect some of the thoughts and discussions that we had from the session last week. We will be sharing the recording as well as some follow-up material from that session. So colleagues at the DRG are welcome to share those also with those who are participating with us today if they are interested. Firstly, as we all know, what gets measured is what gets done. And therefore, it is important that we track the participation and leadership of national and local organizations of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action and in humanitarian coordination. The Interagency Standing Committee's guidance already gives us indicators for measuring the participation and leadership of national and local OPDs in humanitarian coordination. However, we've struggled in the past to track this progress because it was largely hindered by what we would say is a lack of a clear definition of who constitutes or what constitutes national and local OPDs. To address this, the Disability Reference Group led a consultative process last year, that was in 2024, to help define the meaning of this and to help us understand who we are tracking and for what purpose. And the Localization Working Group of the Global Cluster Coordination Group contributed to this, and we are thankful for having the opportunity to contribute to that area of work. Now that this has been done, we hope that this definition will help clusters and other bodies within cluster coordination to better track the participation and leadership of OPDs in humanitarian coordination, to identify gaps and to help us understand what concrete actions can we take to ensure meaningful engagement of OPDs in the humanitarian action, in humanitarian response, and in humanitarian coordination. Secondly, linked to what I said about what gets measured is what gets done, is documenting examples of where we see achievements of participation and leadership of national and local organizations in humanitarian coordination. We have some good examples, but we are not always good at documenting those. And I think that's something that we could all work better on, because what we document and we are able to share can easily get translated in different languages and can inspire and guide others on what to do and also what not to do, so that we don't make the same mistakes if we can avoid them. Now, we've heard already from one of the speakers in Ukraine, and last week we also had the Ukraine Association of Persons with Disabilities share with us their experience in advocating for accessibility and support to persons with disabilities in terms of humanitarian assistance in Ukraine. We heard how this national organization or the Association of Persons with Disabilities helped to advocate for the needs of persons with disabilities in the emergency response in Ukraine, how they were able to advocate for accessible shelter, accessible transportation, and other essential services, as well as other items which persons with disabilities may require, for example, persons with mobility impairments or other impairments that they may require assistance with, including medical assistance. So that was a good example of persons with disabilities engaging and advocating for the needs of those affected in the response who themselves are suffering or have disabilities. I beg your pardon, that have disabilities. Now, we've also seen some examples, including from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where we have seen the education cluster making efforts so that children with disabilities are not left behind in education provision. We can share some of these examples, as we've said, once we document them. In Myanmar, we've seen within the coordination mechanism at the interagency level, we have examples of a technical advisory group within OCHA or led by OCHA, and also within the water, sanitation, and hygiene cluster. They have a group that looks at humanity and inclusion, or disability and inclusion, that is supported by UNICEF and Humanity and Inclusion. So we see two technical bodies or two operational bodies that support and advocate for the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the response, but also in the coordination. In Somalia, we heard from an organization known as the Federation of Somali Disability Organizations. And this is an organization that has taken a lead to advocate for persons with disabilities to be included in the humanitarian response in the drought crisis in Somalia, which is not just an ongoing crisis, but it is recurrent. They partnered with various international and local organizations to conduct needs assessments, looking at the needs of persons with disabilities to ensure that their voices are represented in the needs assessment, in the needs analysis, and which eventually leads to looking at resource allocation. So when resources are getting allocated, how are the needs of persons with disabilities, including children, addressed? How are they represented? And I think it's important to recognize the work that these organizations are doing. Now, these are examples that we are sharing. I'm sure there are many more that have been shared today and that will be shared today. And we are also asking that others, when they document these examples, that we pool our resources together and share these so that we can learn from each other and that we can continue to inspire each other. We are now being asked in this humanitarian research to be efficient, to make the best use of the limited resources that we have. We've had this message before, but it is now more than ever going to be important for us to do that. So when we pull our resources together, including our knowledge and our lessons, then it helps us to answer the call for a more efficient humanitarian system. Lastly, I would like to leave a couple of messages. One is to say that whatever lies ahead of us in the humanitarian research and the future after that, it must not only be efficient and localized, but needs to be inclusive in order to serve the needs of millions of children and other affected population, all those who are already at risk of being affected by humanitarian crisis across the world. We, as the Localization Working Group of the Global Cluster Coordination Group, remain fully committed to work with stakeholders such as the Disability Reference Group, disability organizations at country level to ensure and to push for safe and meaningful engagement of national and local organizations of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action and in coordination. Together, we can create a future where persons with disabilities, including children, are not only included, but are also driving the change that we all wish to see. Thank you, and have a good afternoon, good evening, and good rest of the morning for those wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Sorry, we cannot hear you now.
Better?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Joyce, for this very insightful presentation. I think it's important, very important to note that, you know, from what you're saying and the very practical country examples that you've given, in the new humanitarian world that we seem to be moving into, it would be important for us to work together to document all the good work that especially local and national organizations of persons with disabilities are doing, so that it can help contexts across the world and support us in becoming more efficient. Let's now hand over to Narciso Rosa Berlanga, who is the head of desk for Latin America and the Caribbean and West and Central Africa at the program unit of the OCHA's country-based pooled funds section, who will share learning from their work on enhancing disability inclusion and promoting engagement of local OPDs. Over to you, Narciso, and because you're my colleague, I'm going to do this, but I'm really sorry. I apologize beforehand, but we're going to have to ask you to be brief in the interest of time. Yeah. And then we will go to interventions from the floor and open for very short Q&A. Over to you, Narciso. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be in this panel and in this very interesting topic that from the country-based pool fund and the pool funds that are managed by OCHA, we are very supportive of all the all the agenda enhancing the role of the organization of persons with disabilities, and also to make more inclusive all the actions we do. We will go directly to the third slide just to advance on the presentation if you want to see. Just to say that we are working under the framework of different documents. We can go to the next one. And when we review the global guidelines for these pool funds in 2021, 2022, we worked together with the Disability Reference Group to review all the action we were doing, and we were implementing also many recommendations, and also that were provided by the Disability Reference Group. The approach we are taking is a very very comprehensive approach regarding disability inclusion, and that includes obviously the work we do with the organization of persons with disability. We have 5 main pillars: promoting the meaningful participation of persons with disabilities, and mainly through the local OPDs in all the processes, not only in funding, that sometimes some of our simplified vision of this support, but in several pillars, as we will see later. The question of encouraging the disability inclusive need assessment and analysis. So we need to be aware of the risks and all the information that this very particular needs assessment provide. A third pillar will be contributing to the knowledge and understanding of disability inclusion. And for that, we cannot do otherwise. We at global level with the Disability Reference Group and other global organizations, but at country level, we are working with these disability technical working groups in some countries, and with this expertise or organization that have a very good expertise on disability. The 4th pillar will be mainstreaming disability in allocation strategies and projects. We also, even if we are targeting sometimes a specific organization of persons with disability to get funding, we also work through our intersectionality, where disabilities are part of the different levels or layers that a project need to have to be also successful and inclusive. And the last one is sometimes one of the more difficult, is to use a disability inclusive language. The question of the accessibility to information. We always think a lot of accessibility as a question of physical component, but there are all the type of impairment also that is linked to the sensory, to the communication, that needs also to for us to pay a different attention to this disability inclusive language also, and the question of the data. If we don't have data, we are not visible. So in that sense, that is important. The next slide, as I mentioned, and I like a lot the previous panelists, because you were speaking also on disability throughout the lens of the localization. So what we are doing on the CBPF last year, for example, 46% of the funding we provide were to local partners, including also OPDs. We are looking at all the how we advance localization, and disability cannot be done differently. So we have 5 pillars where we try to look at that: the fund and allocation strategy, project design, implementation, and monitoring, how we invest a lot on capacity assessment and development, how the partners that we make eligible to the fund have a specific policies on disability, and that is part of the capacity assessment we do. The governance and partnership, we will see in the coming slide how we integrate OPDs and persons with disability in all the governance and the partnerships, equitable partnerships we establish. And the last one, the communication and visibility. We need to be made visible what we do. Not only the result for donors is important, and we appreciate the support that the colleagues from Australia, because what I was in Myanmar was one of the donors that really invest and push us to be better on disability. But also all these partners are implementing these projects on disability. Let's go to the next slide. Here you see some example. Around a little less than 20% of the people assisted last year by the funds. More than 5 million person was person with disabilities. And that was done in big part through the partners that have an expertise, but also with local OPDs. So that is important. Also to say that we provide capacity development on disability in some of the funds. We are present in 21 countries. And also the question of being part of all the processes. So are the OPDs in somehow also they are participating, as the colleagues from Afghanistan say. For example, in Afghanistan, we are this disability and inclusion working group that are part of the revision of the project, the technical review of the project. But one of the important parts we have in this CBPF at country level is advisory board. At the moment, we have 6 funds that have OPDs as part of members of this advisory board. I need to say that sometimes gender is is another layer, but it's very linked to OPDs, because 4 of them are also woman-led organization. The case, for example, the colleague in Myanmar is a woman-led organization, but also an OPD. So that is one thing we would like to remind. I will not go to the next, maybe we go, if we can pass a slide. That is example. That is, for example, this photography is a picture, is an example of some project that we do on rehabilitation of some collaborating with persons that need some kind of rehabilitation also. But let's move to the next one, because the presentation will be shared. There are many examples of targeting allocation to OPDs in Myanmar, last year in Nigeria. We have in DRC, the colleague mentioned also that. But just to move forward, I would like to finish with this slide on what will be for us the effort we need to continue and increase regarding the participation of organization of persons with disability and inclusion of persons with disability. Integrating, of course, disabilities in the regular programming from this intersectionality approach in all the different cycles. We cannot see disability if we don't look also at the age and the gender. The colleagues mentioned the children, but I would like to remind also that a big part of persons with disability we work with is person, for example, you claim this person, older person. So the question of the age component and the gender is a very important thing that we need to to take into account when we work with disability, ensuring that persons with disability are specifically targeted, and in the project we have specific activities for them, and not only looking at the disability based on any physical impairment, but as I say, other type of impairment. The question of MAP and further engage with community-based OPDs. We are sometimes speaking about organizations that have an expertise on disability. Sometimes they are national, international organizations, but it's important we look also to these small community-based organizations. We always offer the CBPF because we are present as you know, in many countries, and we are looking at the localization, but we are a tool of the humanitarian community at country level to pilot, to explore, to advance. And it's an important tool that we need to use to advance and enhance the role of the local and national OPDs. Directly was a part of a bigger intervention, another program, no? And the last thing I would like to say, and is for that I also thank you, the colleagues from Australia at the beginning of this panel, is encourage donors to increase their attention to disability issues, not only with funding, that is crucial, and now with the current situation we are living, a global context is important, but also with advocacy, participating in this type of forums, and also being a tool for us to extending and expanding the donor base and the sensibility to other type of organization and donor and cooperation agencies that could be also very critical in our work. I will stop here, and maybe later if there's any question, I can come back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Narciso, for your very short but very clear presentation. And I really appreciate the point that you made on intersectionality. Having worked in different country operations as well, we know that if you're a woman of a certain age in a humanitarian setting, and that you also live with a disability, you're pretty much invisible in a lot of our responses. And so this notion of intersectionality is very, very important to be taken into consideration. Now, we wanted to continue and ensure that we have another donor perspective here. And we're going to have, with your permission, probably we're going to run over a little bit. I hope not. It's now 15:19 here in Geneva. And we want to make sure that we have another donor perspective from Ms. Barbara Leck, who is joining us online from FCDO, and to tell us about donor principles on promoting locally led action through pooled funds. Barbara, I hope you're there, and handing over to you now online. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Great, and thank you so much for a fantastic and really thought-provoking event. I'll keep my comments short because I'm sure everybody has many questions. But a lot that was said really resonated, particularly the fact that we cannot deliver effective humanitarian assistance and needs-based principled humanitarian assistance if we're not being disability inclusive, and really being equitable in our approach should be the baseline for everything we do in terms of effective humanitarian action. Over the last year, the UK, working with Switzerland and Denmark, started an effort of convening donors, convening a range of humanitarian actors to discuss how we could push and how we could promote locally led action together. And one of the key things that surfaced is what our colleague from Afghanistan mentioned earlier, is that the humanitarian system is inherently not very well designed to work with local and grassroots organizations. And what we lose there is all those organizations that are playing such a critical role, particularly organizations of persons with disabilities, to both help understand needs on the ground, to help us think about how to shape humanitarian responses that are inclusive. But those discussions also helped surface that there are really fascinating pathways that already emerge for us to do better as a collective. And those pathways are the full range of humanitarian funds that exist across the globe. So the multilateral ones, the NGO ones, the private sector ones, some are local, some are global. Narcisio spoke very well of the work of the DRG country-based support fund. And what we were seeing is a lot of really interesting work happening there, not just through the DRG funds, but also, for instance, through feminist funds that are really very intentionally working with organizations representing people at the intersection of disability, gender, etc., to promote more inclusive humanitarian assistance. So I will post in the sidebar a link to the guidance that came out of all of those discussions, and the purpose of this guidance, which was developed with the very kind support of the International Disability Alliance, is really to provoke more conversations between grassroots organizations, intermediary organizations, and donors about how we can continue progressing this really important agenda together. And the final thing I'm going to say is we were very encouraged to hear that the Emergency Relief Coordinator is calling, for instance, for all country-based support funds to pivot to protect local and national actors. I think we can all agree this has never been more timely, and it's really great to hear from Narcisio everything that is happening. And obviously, we can all hope that we all double down this year on what we can do collectively to protect organizations of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for this intervention. And it's, as you say, it's really important that we keep the conversation going with donors as well, to ensure that there's common or cohesive understanding of the work that needs to be done with the engagement, the effective engagement of persons with disabilities and the organizations that represent them. I want to turn now to our colleague Fadi Harabo, who is online from Syria, and who will give us very short and concise perspective from a national organization post-Assad regime and what is going on. And with your indulgence, we will go over a little bit and we will see if we have perhaps just a very few number of questions that we can take after Fadi's intervention. Over to you, Fadi, if you're online with us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you are hearing me, right?
Yep, we hear you very well.
Thank you. Actually, this is Fadi Harabo. I'm from Sanad. Sanad, an organization registered and established in Turkey as a cross-border organization during the Syrian conflict in 2030. So from that time, actually, we starting to work on advocacy on the right of persons with disabilities and the inclusive approach of designing project to targeting the refugees who are already in Turkey, and also the Syria operation with Northwest Syria, mainly focusing. Actually, after fall of the regime, we surprised with the situation of the OPDs inside Syria, and also the new government. So there is a lot of challenging, actually, unfortunately, in Syria. The last needs assessment showing from the UN agencies as like in 28% of the populations having disabilities, and this percentage is different from area to area. So in some conflict area, this percentage is more than this number, and in some areas less than the number. But in general, we can say that there is a big challenging that's huge capacity need for the OPDs. We have a lot of OPDs, by the way, inside Syria, but most of them is charity-based working. They don't have any capacity, unfortunately. So, but they have good access for the community. So, but again, we don't have level of policy as a country-based policy, and we have Also some challenging, also accessibility, one of the big challenging, because non-governmental offices, like infrastructures like destroyed, after the war, long-term war. So the accessibility barriers, like one of the big challenging we're facing inside Syria. So again, it's like lack of inclusive policies on the governmental levels, and OPD levels also one of the big challenging, and stigma and discriminations, like for the cultural stigma I'm speaking, it's like one of the biggest challenging, unfortunately, inside Syria. So again, limited of the capacity of OPD. Because I have such short time, let me focus on the localization and how the localization like supported our work for the last 2 years, 3 years. Actually, before the localizations approach, in the last 2 3 years, there was huge, let's say it's like, access between the OPDs who are already working in the field and the international donors. So most of the OPDs in the reality, they have access for the community. They are working, but they are working more charity based. They don't have like, standard policies. They don't have any, like, let's say it's like external audited and license. So most call and the grant call and the proposal call coming within the standard of requirement. And there was a gap between this OPDs to access this grant. So then it's within the localization, actually, the new modality of some donors, which is a mentoring approach and requirement for some national and international NGOs to take some partners from the OPDs and working through them, like building capacity. This is the approach was actually working well. And hopefully now inside Syria, we can do some work. And as a Senate now, we are working with our partners actually to have one big conference to collect all international organizations and a governmental organization together in next 2 months to have this focus on more the needs of disabilities and the needs of the OPDs, and more focusing on the governmental level to have the inclusive policy in the government.
Thank you so much.
I will continue.
Thank you, Fadi. This was amazing. I think, as we get towards the end, this message of ensuring that there is collaboration, at global and local level to make sure that local organizations and international organizations continue to work together to ensure that the needs of persons with disabilities are effectively taken care of, so that we indeed leave no one behind in our responses and structures and processes. Thanks so much. We are running out of time, but I'm going to ask if there's one burning question from the room, and then we're going to take one from online that we think is interesting for everyone to hear. And while I look for hands raised in the room, I think, Kirsten, if you want to read it out. Yes, please. The one from Dennis. Yes, please.
Great. So we have a question in the Q&A here. Thank you for all those who have posed questions. We hope we'll be able to get answers at least in writing. But there's a question here from Dennis, who's also from the GCCG Localization Working Group. And he's asking, now that we do have the clarity on the local and national OPD definition, is there a way to track how funding is going to local OPDs? We're thinking perhaps Narciso or any other panelists are welcome to respond.
Over to you, Narciso, if you have insights on this question.
Yeah, if you can repeat the question, I didn't get the full question.
Sure, it was the question around, now that we have a definition of local and national OPD, is there a way for us to strengthen how we track that funding reaches local and national OPDs?
Yeah, thank you for reminding that. So yeah, in fact, we are in the country-based pool fund. We have tracking what is the organization that directly and indirectly we are funded an organization of persons with disabilities. So that is the way. I mean, I think that it's important, as someone mentioned also before, that to track that, to see what is the level and to see the progress and how we can improve. If we see that, I mean, is normally what we see that part of the intervention that we are doing with persons with disabilities through big programs or inside of a big program. It's very small, still the amount of funding that is going directly to an organization of persons with disabilities. And in that sense, is a question of the intersectionality, how we can also work together and directly or involve in this organization in the implementation, and in the design we can adapt. So the tracking is a challenging thing, but I think we need to put in all of us in our system the possibility that we will provide funding to this organization, that we know when, how much money, and in which type of engagement we do with this organization. I think it's important. We are working on that, but still the progress is very, I mean, it's not a level that we would like, no? In a sense.
Great, thank you so much, Narciso. I don't see any hands in the room. And we're gonna wrap up. We want to thank all of our distinguished panelists for having taken part in the session. We note that it's really important to ensure that we consider disability equity rather than or in addition to inclusion, that we also have organizations of persons with disabilities at the leadership table within HCTs, within ICCGs, within different coordination structures. We want to make sure that information as well as infrastructure is accessible to persons with disabilities. We want to also make sure that everything that we do, we document and that we share with different contexts so that it helps us be more effective, especially in the current environment. And we also want to make sure that with the work that the DRG is doing, the new definition that has been launched with the help of the GCCG, that we also track financing more closely to see that the amount of funding that is actually going to OPDs and how we can make sure that it is increased, that it is improved, and that it actually reaches persons living with disabilities. Cross-sectionality also came out strongly as something that we need to pay attention to. We thank you very, very much for your participation. We wanted to make sure that you see the contact information for the DRG up on the screen. The questions that were asked online, I believe, were answered online, and the presentations from this panel are going to be shared. Please be sure to check the program for other inclusion sessions, one of which is happening on Wednesday on inclusion area strategic session, who are we reaching and how, at 2 p.m. in Amphitheater D. Thank you so much. I want to make sure, I don't know, Al-Hadi, as the co-chair of the DRG, if you have one last word for us before we close, and then we're going to part ways. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much all. Just to share that by the end, to foster really inclusion and localization, we need to have a genuine partnership with OPDs, genuine partnerships that recognize the expertise and the lived experience of persons with disabilities, and also recognize their need for support to strengthen their capacity, to get funding, to remove barriers to access all area of coordination and decision making. Thank you so much, our distinguished delegation. Thank you, our participant. Thank you, our service providers captioning. sign language interpretation, technical support, and our amazing colleague Yelena supporting everything behind. And on behalf of the co-chair, we would like to announce the close of this session and welcoming further discussion later on in another opportunities.
Thank you, Al-Hadi, and thank you, everyone. Yes. See you at the next session.
Thank you.